Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Dynasty Tailgate Podcast brought to you by the Semi Pro Fantasy Sports Podcast Network. I'm Billy Mansell, as it says above, at Ombre Vendor on Twitter, if you would like to follow me on there or come chit chat. We're getting closer to the draft. Senior Bowl is 2 weeks away. We booked our hotel. I've got my credentials all figured out. We are ready to rock and roll down to Mobile, Alabama, so we can watch some rookies play some football. This is a stacked rookie class down in Mobile this year. Jim Nagy has put together quite the eclectic list of players that are going to be down there. And next week, I will kind of get into kind of a Senior Bowl preview that players I'm kind of looking forward to and just overall what we're looking for to find out down there in the Senior Bowl. But there's going to be a lot of drafted players and a lot of highly drafted players down there in that Senior Bowl. So I'm pretty excited to see what everybody is going to be able to do down there. But me and Joe are going to head down there from the offensive points, and we're going to have a good old time. So today we're going to talk about IDP rookies for the NFL draft this season. Pretty excited about that. And we'll just have to see, who's going where, what's going on. But there's a lot of really highly talented IDP rookies in this draft class. So I can't wait to see where some of them go. But we're going to talk about, I think I got 11 written down today. So we're just going to talk about the best 11. In my opinion, others are going to have, different players up there. I even got a couple cornerbacks that I'm excited about, which aren't normally IDP players, but there's a couple that I think in this draft class in particular could mean something going forward. I see Josh has a question to start off here. Who do you think the Eagles will draft with their three first-round picks? Well, to be perfectly honest with you, I think one of them is going to be a wide receiver. Hopefully it's a Drake London. I don't know if he falls to them because some mock drafts have him headed down to, even maybe like the seventh pick, eighth pick in the draft. It's kind of wild. 13th is usually Garrett Wilson. Browns have him circled in most draft people's opinion. So Eagles, I think, could be in that next group of, or next person looking for a player. And so I think they're going to definitely draft a wide receiver. You can pretty much book that. I would say they probably get a defensive player. I'm kind of looking at them getting like a Drake Jackson, something like that, but there's plenty of good players in this draft for them to get. And then honestly, they might trade that last pick. I don't know that yet. But I kind of think the Eagles seem like they're going to package one of those picks. We kind of talked about it. Josh is on the Offensive Points podcast. We kind of talked about maybe them giving up one of those picks for Calvin Ridley down in Atlanta. And honestly, that just makes a lot of sense. You're not going to get a receiver better than Ridley right now if he's, all the way better from what he's been going through. But if you can get Ridley, you can get a wide receiver from this class, one of these top 4 or 5 guys, and then a defensive player. I think the Eagles hit a home run in this draft. So that's what I think they should do. We'll see. I don't know if I can really trust their front office, but we'll see what happens, It's always fun to watch what the Eagles come up with. They usually botch draft picks. They've done that in the past, but there's a couple of can't miss players in here, and hopefully they're able to identify them in time before they may end up making a big mistake. So let's get right into the rookies for today. The first one on my board personally, it's not this way for a lot of people, but I just think he's a can't miss prospect. And that is Nakobe Dean from Georgia. He's a linebacker, just won the national championship. I'll just run through the stats real quick. 72 tackles, 6 sacks, 10.5 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, 1 return for a touchdown, and 2 forced fumbles. He's just everywhere. Like, this guy is just his ability on the field. He is so fast as a linebacker. He's a little short. He's like 6 foot tall, about 250 or 220 weight wise, but he's a really solid cover linebacker. I mean, I'm going to say Micah Parsons. I'm not saying that he is Micah Parsons. I'm just saying he has the ability to play multiple positions at linebacker, and he can cover. He can do all of that. He's really good. The stats aren't knock you off the page for a linebacker, but if you watch the Georgia defense this year, there's 5, 6 first rounders on that defense for just this season, even maybe. So I don't want to hold it against him that, the whole team was good. So he's really good. Can't miss linebacker, in my opinion. I personally think he is a better prospect coming out of Georgia than Roquan Smith was when Roquan Smith came out of Georgia back. I believe that was 2017, maybe 2018 when he came out. I think it was 2018. But Roquan Smith, obviously, you've seen what he's able to do in Chicago, and it's been incredible. So I just think this is the next player in a long line of Georgia players that has been inescapable. So first player off the board for me in IDP drafts is Nakobe Dean, and I just think you're going to get a lot out of him because he's able to do a lot of the impact plays that you're going to look for in an IDP player going forward. My second player off the board, pretty obvious, Kayvon Thibodeaux from the Oregon Ducks. I know Mel Kiper hates calling him Myles Garrett, and he is not Myles Garrett. I will say that, but he has the abilities of Myles Garrett. His ability to break through and get around a tackle, not necessarily having to beat him all with strength all the time. He's just got really good moves, and just he's shorter and smaller than Aidan Hutchinson by a little bit, not a lot. But I just think his instinct and if he can stay healthy, which is another problem with Kayvon Thibodeaux, if he can stay healthy, I don't see how you can miss with Kayvon Thibodeaux. That's why he's being projected as one of the first 2 picks in the draft. And to me, can't miss. Whoever gets him, you put him across. Please, Jacksonville, put him across from Josh Allen. Watch what that defense can be in 2 or 3 years. It's going to be ferocious. So hopefully he lands somewhere like that is what I'm hoping. And I think you're going to have a guy here where he's going to be available and he's going to be very good for years to come. Next on my list, Aidan Hutchinson from Michigan. I forgot to get to Kayvon Thibodeaux's stats. Look at me jumping the gun. 49 tackles, 7 sacks, 12 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles. He did only play 10 games this season, so those stats are a little bit lower than they probably would be if he played the full 14 games, or 12 games. But it's still good enough, honestly. Like he played in the Pac-12 championship, got outplayed by that defense, but overall, good player. He will be good in the NFL. He looks like a much better NFL player than he probably would have been on a college team. So Kayvon Thibodeaux, very good. No questions in my opinion. On to the next player, defensive end from Michigan, Aidan Hutchinson. Stats, 62 tackles, 14 sacks, 16 and a half tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles. Another can't miss, in my opinion. I thought in my head he wasn't a huge sack guy, but he was. He got a ton of sacks, and they came in bunches too. In the games that he was able to get home, he was able to get home a lot, and he was unstoppable. Now, when he played Georgia, it did not go so well, but against like Ohio State, which is really good competition, 3 sacks in that game. He was a defensive force. I mean, that entire team, that Michigan team was just really good in that game, and Aidan Hutchinson kind of solidified himself as one of the best players in this draft and in college football during that game. I could very well see him going number 1 as well. Could be to Jacksonville. I think, if you put either him or Kayvon Thibodeaux ahead with Josh Allen on that defensive line or as a defensive end, nothing, no notes. That's a very good defense that you got there. So either he's going to go there or he's going to go to the Lions, one of the two. Either way, you can build around him for the future. So number 4 on my list is Kyle Hamilton from Notre Dame. We got robbed of a full season of Kyle Hamilton, but I think he played 7 games, 34 tackles, two tackles for loss, 3 interceptions, 4 passes defensed. He's a really good coverage safety. Like this guy can get from one side of the field to the other in the midst of a play, and it ends up really good for him. So I can't wait to see what team he ends up on because that will mean a lot for him. But I can't wait to see who he ends up with. He's going to go in the top 5 of the draft, most likely. I can't see how that goes any other way. But Kyle Hamilton, I think he's 6'4", can cover anyone, can cover anything. I cannot wait to see what team he ends up with because they're getting a hell of a safety. Whether that it could be Houston for sure. I mean, that could happen. Could be a lot of teams, but I think what you're getting from Kyle Hamilton is the next great safety and another can't miss IDP prospect. So far, all of these players are cannot miss. I mean, I could see a couple of these guys going in the first round of like a super flex IDP draft with 12 teams. No problem. Like they're that impact of a player, and I think they're going to come in and be impactful right away. I don't think it's going to take them time. It's just the way that the way that they're built, the way that they think that an offense is going to. It's none of this like Isaiah Simmons or Zaven Collins where you're going to have to figure out where they kind of mesh in with the defense and all that. These guys are going to come in and immediately be able to play right away, and they're going to make their mark known immediately. So Kyle Hamilton is another one of those guys. We'll have to see what the medicals check out on him. But other than that, I think that he will be a solid player for years to come. So next on my list, Devin Lloyd, Utah. These stats are going to freak you out a little bit, so just bear with me. 111 total tackles, 22 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, 4 interceptions, 1 forced fumble. 2 of those interceptions were returned from touchdowns. This guy is an absolute freak. Absolute freak. I mean, he's played all 4 years at Utah. I can see the argument for making him the linebacker 1 in this class. I actually can. How can I argue against either taking him or Nakobe Dean for for the number 1 linebacker? And if you got him in the second round of your IDP draft, I couldn't say that you made the wrong call there. I would love to see where he ends up. I hope it's with a team that actually needs a linebacker so that he doesn't get just lost in the shuffle. But if he ends up with a defensive team, like put him, I hate saying this, but put him with like the Jets, for example, and that could really be something, honestly. Because Robert Saleh is really good defensive mind, and putting him with a team like that, I feel like I say the Jets a lot, but they need a lot of pieces. It's kind of tough for me to say that they wouldn't be able to take someone like this and make him great. And they do have 2 picks in the first round, so we'll have to see what they end up doing with that second one. Because the first one might be offensive line, or they might trade him. Who knows? But Devin Lloyd is, the stats speak for themselves. What do I need to say? He pushes people in, like he uses his strength to push players into the quarterback to sack them. I can't. There's not much more I can say about that. He is a really good linebacker. He's going to be at the Senior Bowl in 3 weeks or 2 weeks. I cannot wait to watch him. He's going to be fantastic in the league, and I cannot wait to see where he ends up. So, moving on. Jordan Davis from Georgia. Thanks, Jordan. Thanks for making his graphic insanely big. But Jordan Davis, you've heard me talk about him on this podcast. He is a defensive tackle, and that usually scares a lot of people because you're like, oh, well, what's the tackle for? Like, is he going to be sack-based? Jordan Davis is so good at playing defensive tackle, though. He's like 330 pounds. He's like 6'5" or something, like 6'3" or 6'4" or something like that. And he is just an incredible player to watch because he's so fluid you'd think for a 330 pounder that he would be unable to move very fluidly because of how big he is. But I will tell you this, you will never be able to tell that he is that weight. I hate that his elbow's like at my mouth. I feel like I'm talking into his elbow, but you will never be able to keep this man like away from your quarterback. And that is exactly what you're looking for in a defensive tackle at the next level. So Jordan Davis, this is where I draw the line at can't miss prospects right here. Jordan Davis is the last player that I'm like, there's no way that player does not succeed at the next level. Now, in your drafts, probably you're not going to take him very high because he is a defensive tackle, and so he is kind of limited depending on the scheme. But I think if you are in the market, especially leagues where you play a defensive tackle, especially like that, you need somebody to fill that spot. They're not easy to find at this kind of level. And if you need it or in the market for one of those, Jordan Davis needs to be on your draft board. He needs to be somebody you're looking out for and somebody that you're thinking about taking. He had stats don't jump off the page: 32 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and I wish I could say that there was better stats to show you, but it's not really, that's not really his game. He's more of a disruptor. But I think at the next level, he could be used more in getting those numbers and getting those tackles, getting the sacks, all that kind of thing. But at Georgia, as I've said, they kind of spread everyone around, so it was kind of tough to get one player to get a lot of stats. That's what happened with Nakobe Dean and like Lewis Seen, who I'll get to at a different time. But those kind of players, kind of tough to get their stats, boosted up when they're on an incredible defense. It was one of the best defenses I've ever seen. So moving on, we're going to get to George Karlaftis. 38 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles at Purdue. He was hot and cold a lot of games when I watched Purdue play. Sometimes you would definitely see George Karlaftis. You would see his impact on the game. I'm pretty sure he had a forced fumble return for a touchdown as well, which does show his athletic ability. But there's just about George, there's some games where he wasn't really that effective at breaking through the line. He kind of used who he was playing to his advantage. He did usually show up for the big games when they played Iowa, when they were mistakenly number 2, and play in games like that. You did see him play and rise to the occasion very well. But I don't have a problem with George Karlaftis. And if you take George Karlaftis, it will be kind of later, I think, because he needs some work. He's going to have to fall to the right team in the draft, but you can't really go wrong with him at the next level because he can pop. He's going to get those plays, and it may take him a minute to catch on fully, but he will eventually catch on. So moving on, no cool graphics for this one, but we do have the names. Kingsley Enagbare. I believe I said that right. We'll see. But he played at South Carolina. He was really good. Very good at sacking the quarterback. The numbers didn't really bear out as much this year, but in the past they did. 43 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. The numbers aren't going to jump off the page at you. Not really as much as you would think they would for a defensive end of his caliber, but I think what you're looking for in a defensive end at that position, because like most leagues, when you're playing at the positions, you have linebacker, you have a defensive line, and then you have obviously the defensive backs. And I think Enagbare has a chance, kind of like Karlaftis, where like given the right scheme, that he is going to pop. Now, is it going to be year 1? I'm not sure about that. This is a defensive end heavy draft, so the teams that need a defensive end are going to get them pretty early in this draft, and then the teams that kind of are thinking about it, like the Eagles, for example, as Josh mentioned the Eagles earlier, that's a team that a defensive end could go to, but I don't think it's going to be like it was this year where there was no defensive ends that were really, popped off the page. There wasn't really any defensive ends that you were like super excited about. But this next year, there's going to be 3 or 4, and you will be able to get someone that is that can fit your scheme or what you need for your team. So one more defensive end is Drake Jackson from USC. 37 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, 1 interception, and 1 forced fumble. I liked Drake Jackson a lot, and through the beginning, like 7 or 8 games, I had him as the defensive end too. I mean, that before Aidan Hutchinson really established and planted his flag. For me, it was Thibodeaux, because I thought, you just look at him and the way that he moves his body, the way that he's able to move around through the pocket and get to the quarterback is something you can't teach. But Drake Jackson was kind of the second one in that to me. It was Drake London from USC and Drake Jackson were the two USC players that I was really high on. And it wasn't until it was kind of the production didn't really show at the end of the season was the problem with Drake Jackson. He kind of tailed off a little bit. The team fired their coach. They were, kind of a mess there at the end. But he's still a good player. I still think what we were seeing at the beginning of the season still could bear out. He was really good at getting to the quarterback. He was able to make his mark known on the games that he was in. He did have the pop plays. He did have the impact plays that you would be looking for at the next level, but not necessarily, as good as you would have hoped. So, excited for Drake Jackson. I think that, I'm kind of have him pegged to go to the Eagles, so we'll see what ends up happening, but that's kind of what I'm thinking right now. All right, moving on. Got two cornerbacks left in this video. We're talking about Derek Stingley. So if you follow Derek Stingley at all, you will know where this story is headed. He only played 3 games this season. He went out with a foot injury. I'm going to put that in air quotes if you're watching the video. A foot injury. Personally, I think he was just going to get out. He got out of the league out of college football so he could start preparing for the league, and I couldn't blame him a bit. LSU was a total mess this season. There was no reason for him to play in those games and risk getting hurt. I will say I'm not positive what happened to him last year. So I'm going to give the stats for 2019 because I think when you listen to anything draft related, when it comes to Derek Stingley, people are going to point back to what he did in 2019 because 2020 and then the first 3 games of 2021, he was not the same guy. And I think a lot of us need to figure out, and I'm sure we'll figure this out in the draft process, of what happened to him. Because in 2019, 38 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 6 interceptions, 15 passes defended. He was a monster, and he was you could not put any of your best receivers lined up against Derek Stingley because they were not going to catch the ball. They were going to have the best or the worst game of their season. Now, that was the year that they won the national title. It was special. There was so many good players on that team that year. I mean, Devin White, for example, Patrick Queen. There was a lot of players from that LSU team that, because they were in that defense, everyone, rising tides lifted all boats, if you will. I'll use that analogy because that is kind of what it looks like happened here. Because once that team got stripped of all of the talent, Derek Stingley's production took a nosedive off of a cliff. And I'm personally it made me nervous last year because I'm going into the season, you were surefire this guy's going to be a star in the NFL for sure because of what he did in 2019. But because of what he did in 2020, it was a middling season. Wasn't great. You could throw on him. It wasn't anything special. And then the first 3 games of 2021 were abysmal. I mean, they weren't good at all. I was confused about what I was watching. You could definitely throw on them. I mean, last year, 2020, LSU was giving up like 500 yards a game through the air. Anybody could throw on them, and it really was kind of confusing. So I'm going to think that he's a little bit closer to 2019 Derek Stingley, and that maybe just the fit and the defense and, because it was Matt Canada was the defensive coordinator in that 2019. He's now coaching for I believe the Steelers. So it's just, I think we can just wash out what happened to him. And that's how I'm going to go into the draft thinking, because I think he's closer to what he was than what this version of him was these last 2 years. Just my personal preference and thought. I got to get to this last guy. I don't have a graphic for him, but it's Ahmad Sauce Gardner from Cincinnati. His nickname is Sauce, but it's Ahmad Gardner from Cincinnati. An absolute freak on that team. So him and Kobe Bryant, no relation. It's just the other cornerback on that team was named Kobe Bryant. But between them two, you could not throw the ball and be successful. It just wasn't happening. Now, when you did watch him play Alabama, okay, Jameson Williams did his thing, but as a whole, Ahmad, they were really good. I mean, and I think that they played Alabama quite well in that game, and it probably tipped off Georgia to a little bit of like how to handle them defensively, because Alabama just ran the ball the entire time. They didn't really give Bryce Young the even chance to throw in that game, but there were a few times that he did get beat, and that's going to happen. But as far as stats wise, 40 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 3 interceptions, 4 forced fumbles, or 4 passes defensed, not forced fumbles. That would be incredible from a quarterback, but 4 passes defensed. He's a good coverage guy, but he can also come off the side. Like, you can send him on a cornerback's rush where he can get this to the passer. I just really like the kid, and he's going to go really high in this draft. And I think just because he's a cornerback, I don't think that means that he's going to be limited in what he's able to do out there on the field. I think any defensive coordinator that has any ability to come up with a scheme would know how to use Ahmad Gardner to his advantage. He's a really great player. I think he's going to get a ton of coverage in this draft, and I think when he gets drafted to wherever he is, I think that you're going to be able to use him in IDP, which is very rare for a cornerback. But between him and Derek Stingley, I think those two guys are draftable. Now, we're not talking the first 3 rounds. Back half of the 4th, when you're taking crazy low running backs and wide receivers and stuff, maybe you sneak one of these guys in there. For sure, the 5th round. I would not let them go to free agency, though. I think somebody who's keen to throw them onto their like taxi squad, for example, or if it's a really deep bench, you keep one of these guys, because eventually they are going to pop. That is for sure going to happen. It's just a matter of how long that's going to take. Derek Stingley, it's going to matter where he goes as far as the scheme goes, but I think that he is still good enough to prove himself. And then Ahmad Gardner, I don't think it matters where you put him, honestly. I think whatever team he ends up on, he's going to be good enough to show what he can do at the next level. So that is the 11 that I have to talk about today. There's still some more, obviously. There's plenty of defensive players to talk about. It's just those are the 11 that I feel most confident about. Here's Josh. Thanks for humoring me, Bill. You're welcome, man. We're here to talk some draft. So if anybody ever has any questions, feel free to put it in the comments. I will gladly answer anything that is in here. But next week, I'm going to be doing a little Senior Bowl preview. I've got kind of all the guys that are going to be at that Senior Bowl lined up. I will be there. It will be exciting. It will be a lot of fun. Hope you follow along. We're going to get as much video. We're going to try to interview players. We're just going to see what, we got the all access pass to the Senior Bowl. So we're going to see just how far that can take us. And I would love to get video. We can only take like 2 minutes of video of practice, but I'm going to make those 2 minutes count. You better believe that. So that's all I got for today. Any of these guys are going to be good. Please leave comments below of players that you might want me to talk about in the future as far as the defense goes. But those 11 right there are a really good start. I know that I made a lot of questions about George Karlaftis, Kingsley Enagbare, and Drake Jackson, but they're still really good defensive ends. There's no reason to doubt what their abilities are at the next level. They will be able to handle themselves. It's just where we were at the beginning of the season. Aidan Hutchinson wasn't even really one of the guys that I had. I mean, he's 6'6", 240, I think. So he probably should have been, but just watching him throughout the season, he was able to rise up the ranks. But these guys were always around. George Karlaftis, his hit games were really high. His not miss games were really low. But if you can get more of those hit games from these guys, I think there is something there. And then Jordan Davis at nose tackle, or defensive tackle, do not sleep on him at all, because he is really good. He is huge. So you're going to, at first glance, you're going to be like, that guy cannot possibly move well. He is so smooth, like butter through offensive lines. And he is strong. He is going to throw whoever is covering him into the quarterback. Literally, he's just going to like shovel pass him into the quarterback. It's crazy to watch any kind of video that you watch of him. I will be making a video for him on the IDP Army TikTok. So follow at the IDP Army on TikTok if you want to watch that. We'll also post the videos on Twitter. Let's be real. That's where the bread gets buttered there on Twitter. So that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I would love to hear any comments. Please leave any reviews or anything on this video. Please subscribe to the channel. I will be doing these videos all the way up to the draft. And then once the draft happens, we'll do a little recap and then we'll hop right to 2023. The grind will never stop for Dynasty. And as far as getting on the same page as all of these players, like I said when we first started this podcast and when I started making these videos, it's just an open notebook. We're making sure everybody in our sphere is in on the same information, because I don't want, and we don't want, anybody to go into a draft and think, who the heck is that guy? Never heard of him before. That's something that I would like to get out of fantasy football, because I don't want anybody to feel like they have no idea who a player is going into it. And defensive players, there are a lot of them, but we're going to try to sift through and find the players that are going to make immediate impacts for your team, not only this year, but for the future, because that's what the Dynasty Tailgate's all about. So this is at Ombre Vendor on Twitter. Please follow me on there. I would love to talk to you, love to chat. If not, leave a comment on this video. I would love to hear that too. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next week. Peace.